Howdy, stranger, you're watching Asinine Tales, true stories straight from the pages of history. So settle in, friend, as I take you on a wild ride back to a time when cowboys roamed the West and outlaws ran the towns, a truly lawless time. When the men were stinky, smelly brutes and the women were dirty, skanky whores. When the streets were narrow, covered in feces, with manure so deep it covered your feet. Now I bet you've all heard the story of Billy the Kid, but I bet you've not heard the tale of his friend and partner, Tommy the teenager. He was just a few years older than the kid, but way more ruthless. Where Billy would tend to take a life sparingly, Tommy would unload into any misfortunate that just happened to look at him funny, or do something that displeased him in some unexplained way. Now, I don't know where the term trigger-happy originated from, but I'd bet money Tommy's got something to do with it, as calling Tommy trigger-happy would be a pretty darn good description. In Tommy's younger years, when he was growing up in Silver City, New Mexico, he was caught stealing from the local hardware store. He'd stolen a box of dynamite, a gun, and a pickaxe. His mother sent him to a Catholic boarding school as punishment. He used the pickaxe to break out of his room, shot the priest, and blew up the church. And, well, friends, this is pretty much the point in the story where Tommy turns from being a rude, bratty, uncontrollable adolescent into a stone-hearted, cold-blooded killer. He spent the next few years traveling around the state stealing food from wherever he could find it, breaking into empty houses for a place to bed down for the night and to shelter from the cold in the winter months. And when the houses weren't empty, he would shoot the residents and steal their money before hot-stepping it to the next town over. Then, after building up quite the reputation for himself in New Mexico, he decided to leave the state for the first time and lay low for a while in the neighboring state of Arizona, making himself both an outlaw and a federal fugitive. This is when he became known notoriously as Tommy the Teenager, wanted dead or alive, with a $500 bounty on his head. While in Arizona, Tommy immediately began his tried and tested means of making money and surviving by robbing and killing people. However, this time he stuck to targeting small encampments or lone travelers, never leaving any witnesses, allowing Tommy to regular the local brothels and saloons without fear of being recognized. Tommy had 3 weaknesses in life. 1, he couldn't resist a good-looking woman. 2, he always gambled, even though he very rarely ever won. And 3, he loved shooting people. He was once quoted as saying, "It's not the killing I enjoyed, it's the shooting. I didn't always shoot to kill. I just enjoyed the fighting. Nothing better to get your heart racing than a good old gunfight." It was during this time in Arizona, when in August of 1877, while Tommy was riding around the Arizona plains looking for someone to shoot and rob, when his horse unexpectedly threw a shoe, and with nobody around for Tommy to kill and steal a horse from, he found himself with little other choice but to head toward the nearby outpost of Fort Grant and find the local blacksmith. Fort Grant was not somewhere Tommy had ever planned on visiting. In fact, he'd planned on avoiding it at all costs, as Fort Grant at that time was actually a United States Army fortification. It began its life as an Old West outpost in Arizona Territory, built in 1860 at the junction of Aravipa Creek and the San Pedro River, and was originally known as Fort Breckenridge. So even though classed as an Army fortification used for military purposes, it's also a large settlement with civilians living in and around the area, with a general store, saloon, and more importantly for Tommy, a blacksmith. He knew the risks he was taking by entering the outpost, but thought if he keeps a low profile, avoids eye contact with people, and stays out of trouble, then what could go wrong? He's wanted in New Mexico, not Arizona, thinking the troops stationed at the outpost shouldn't recognize him. Luckily for Tommy, he was right and was able to walk straight in without issue. Not wanting to waste any time, Tommy approached the first civilian he saw and inquired about the blacksmith, all while keeping his head down and continuing to avoid eye contact with any passing soldiers. He was told the local blacksmith's name was Frank Cahill, but that Frank was also a real mean son of a bitch who's usually, if not always, drunk. So if he's not in his workshop down the street, he'll most likely be at the bar in the saloon, razzing people or taunting some poor kid. So after checking the workshop and finding it empty, Tommy headed for the saloon. As he approached, he could hear a commotion taking place inside and a man shouting, "Frank, settle down, you're drunk! This ugly son of a bitch just cheated me!" "Ugly? I ain't ugly, old man, and I didn't cheat you. You're as crooked as your teeth, you ugly lil hog-faced cheat." Then, as Tommy pushed open the saloon doors and walked in, the commotion stopped and the room went silent as everyone's head turned toward the door. It was around noon, so the place was practically empty. Just a couple of cowboys over at the bar, a few old men, and 3 people sitting at a card table playing poker. Clearly, this was where the commotion was coming from, as one of the men sitting at the table had a bad look to him with hostile intentions in mind, focused toward a much younger, goofy-looking kid sitting opposite him. Straight away realizing the angry drunk man was Frank Cahill, the blacksmith, Tommy immediately headed in their direction, saying in a friendly, upbeat manner, "Gentlemen, is it okay if I join you?" With Tommy thinking he could calm the situation down, while at the same time sweet-talk the intoxicated drunk blacksmith into reshoeing his horse for free, or at least at a highly discounted rate, as Tommy actually only had a few dollars left in his pocket. He was planning to just shoot the blacksmith after, so having an opportunity to win a free service rather than to murder someone felt like a better, more convenient option, well, at the time at least. And with that, Tommy went to sit down as Frank looked at him and said loudly, "Join us! Why would you want to play against a stinking cheat?" With the young lad sitting across from Frank replying, "Now god dang it, old man, I didn't cheat you. Stop with the razzin' or you ain't gonna like where this is going." Tommy intervened again, this time not looking at anyone in particular, whilst looking down at the cards and big pot of money laying on the table. "Gentlemen, please. I'm sure the kid never cheated. Probably just an unlucky hand." The young man looked straight at Tommy and said, "Kid? Who you calling kid?" Frank laughed. "Ha! He's right about that, Billy! Billy the cheatin' kid!" The kid suddenly jumped to his feet and in a blink of an eye had his gun drawn, pointed at Frank's head, shouting, "I didn't cheat!" just as 2 playing cards dropped from his sleeve. An awkward silence fell upon the table as everyone's eyes crossed paths for a moment. Suddenly, the sound of someone racking a shotgun came from behind the kid. The bartender had pulled out a gun from under the bar and had it pointed toward the table, stating with a loud yet worried voice, "Billy, I don't want no trouble in here. Just lay down your pistol and leave," as his hand shook trying to steady the long shotgun barrel. Now this put Tommy in quite the predicament. If the bartender shoots at the kid, well, Tommy's thinking he's gonna end up dead, or at least with a face full of buckshot. He can't draw down on the kid. He's fast, but not that fast. Plus, the kid already has his gun cocked and aimed. Then, Frank banged his fist hard on the table, causing the money to fly up in the air and the drinks to spill over, while shouting angrily, "I'm gonna kill you, Billy! You're a dead man!" Tommy noticed the kid's face change. He knew that look. It was the same look that he got whenever he was about to kill a man. The kid replied in a calm, relaxed tone, "Well, thanks for the heads up, Frank, and thanks for finally calling me a man." And with that, Billy let off 2 shots into the blacksmith's head, splattering the man who'd been sitting next to Frank quietly up to this point with blood and brains, causing him to jump up in shock, screaming uncontrollably. Tommy, sensing the situation had just gone from bad to worse and noticing the bartender steady his aim and about to shoot, Tommy drew his gun, firing 1 shot, hitting the bartender in the shoulder, making him drop the shotgun and dive for cover. The 2 cowboys standing up at the bar hightailed it out the back door, leaving just Tommy and Billy at the table, with a screaming man standing in front of them. Tommy stood up briskly, knocking the man out cold with the butt of his gun, before quickly turning and pointing it at the kid, who immediately followed suit and pointed his gun back at Tommy. With the kid thinking Tommy just saved his life by shooting the bartender before having a chance to get a shot off hitting him in the back, Billy smiled at Tommy and said, "Thanking you kindly, mister. I ain't got no trouble with you." But that dumb, stupid, razzin' son of a bitch Frank had it coming. The kid then pointed his gun away from Tommy and down at the table, toward the scattered mess of money, then said with a playful smile, "I'll split it with you." Tommy was a little taken back, as even though the timing and circumstances weren't the best, it was the first time anyone had shown him any type of kindness. So Tommy lifted his gun and, while cracking a slight smile, replied, "You got a spare horse?" Billy pointed toward the unconscious man and dead blacksmith and said, "No, but they do." Tommy took an immediate liking to the kid. Then, as he went to scoop up the money from the table in his arms, he found himself inadvertently asking the kid if he had anywhere to go, which again shocked Tommy. As what did he care? Tommy didn't care about people, let alone some crazy kid who just blew a man's head off. Yet, despite all this, Tommy found himself heading back to his hideout with a new horse and a new partner in tow, who Tommy nicknamed Billy the Kid. And with that, the legend of Billy the Kid and Tommy the Teenager begins.